Okay, so hey guys, and welcome back to another predictions video, and in today's video I'm going to be predicting the Hughes versus Nurmagomedov fight. And so if you are new around here and you haven't yet subscribed, please do so, like the video if you do indeed like the video, and let's get straight into this. So this is arguably one of the biggest events PFL can put on at the moment, and to be honest, I don't mind it as a matchup, and I think it's going to make for an interesting contest with, the argue and I suppose the narrative that's been built around it of it being a McGregor versus Khabib 2.0. Is that the case? No, not at all. And it's, perhaps, PFL is forcing him narrative a little bit. I'll touch upon it a bit more in a moment, but to speak about them and give them both the kind of overall breakdowns, Hughes is 13-1 with 6 KOs and 3 submissions, and Nurmagomedov is 18-0 with 8 KOs and 6 submissions. This is for the Bellator lightweight world title. Hughes' last fight was a win via split decision versus McKee, and Nurmagomedov's last fight was a win via unanimous decision versus Shabili. And like I say, to speak a bit more, I suppose, what I was touching upon before. Like I mentioned, this is perhaps branded as this McGregor Khabib 2. Obviously, Hughes was keen to get McGregor in his corner for this fight, and them trying to maybe a bit of like an Ultimate Fighter type style where they had kind of one fighter each going up against each other and their rivalry kind of be reignited through that. But McGregor didn't really seem too fussed about getting involved from what I've seen. He might spring up on fight night. You never really know what happens with McGregor, but for the most part it seems like that isn't going to be the case. And in general, they're perhaps, like I say, trying to force a bit of a narrative with this fight, and the PFL arguably are not doing the best at the moment, and I feel like fans are expecting them to fail, and it's harsh. And I don't mind what they're doing. I'm a fan of them as a promotion. They put on some very good fights in the past. The Ngannou Ferreira card, just it's one of the recent big ones, was a excellent show as a whole. To be completely honest, and it had some great fights. They've also done Bellator versus PFL, which I think was a great card, and some other great cards. Their tournament formats have been very good as well, and have kind of breeded some great fighters. We've got Ditcheva, who's an excellent women's fighter coming through at the moment, and some other great male fighters as well who are coming through. And so, like I say, if you look at some of the fighters they've had in the past as well, I mean, Kayla Harrison, to name one, was an excellent champion for them. And so, like I say, they've definitely served a place in the sport, and that's not saying that I believe that they're going to be going away anytime soon, but they are kind of expected to fail. That is arguably through maybe Dana White and his comments saying that the financial side of things for PFL have been on the background, kind of struggling a little bit, and that has of course been shown through them halving their prize money for their tournaments. A 1 million prize money is quite a lot, and quite was expected to drop at some point, and it was just a big thing to have, and that was perhaps a bit of their draw, to be completely honest, because they had that as such a huge reward. But now, like I say, they halved that, and they bought the likes of Ngannou in on a huge contract, and they had that fight with Herrera, but now they don't really know what to do with Ngannou, and because it is on a huge contract, it means that he probably will fight for the PFL again, but also at the same time, he's kind of been let to just kind of do whatever he wants in the boxing scene as well, so he might not even return to the PFL. They've also got Jake Paul that they've signed on, which, to be honest, hasn't really done anything in the PFL either. He hasn't fought, he's been at a few press conferences and things, but other than that, just bringing in these fighters, signing them to contracts and to deals, and then just not really doing anything with them, it's just a bit interesting, and it's definitely brought more eyes to them as a promotion, but at the same time, has the eyes been worth the actual financial costs in which they have? And it seems like there is minimal big fights left for them. I mean, some of their best fighters aren't huge names as of yet. They've got some excellent fighters, but they aren't, like I mentioned, huge names. This fight probably is one of their biggest fights, if not their biggest fight yet. Available to him at the moment. Nurmagomedov, just the name in which he has is enough to drive that fan base to come and watch him. And he, of course, being unbeaten as well and being trained by Khabib, they're really kind of, I suppose, rinsing what they can to an extent with, having Khabib in the corner, making sure that there's always a camera on him, kind of showcasing him more than anything because of how popular he is. And so they're very much maybe doing a bit of a popularity type contest at the moment. And I mean, all of their and mainly their only big cards are in the UK. I mean, in the UAE, and so there isn't. That's where the money's going to be, and that's where they're going to get paid to put on the most amounts of events. And they've even had the likes of like Ronaldo come up to that and Ghana events. But yeah, it's just interesting to see that they really are very money focused, which is understandable as a business. But I think they're, like I say, forcing a narrative a bit more, and as a result, possibly having to do a bit more than that of the UFC to be actually able to sell their fights, because I just don't know how many, like I say, big fights they've got left, how many big fighters they've got, and what names they can really put together. There's a few good Bellator fighters still about, Eblin being one of them, and, perhaps they can do something, but for the most part, there is quite slim pickings of the top level type fighters in which they have. They did well signing some ex UFC fighters, but you don't want to just be doing that all the time. You want to bring your own product yourself. And, this fight, like I mentioned, is definitely that. It's their own product. It's obviously they've merged with Bellator. I'm not really too sure what's happening with Bellator. It's sad to see that the merge kind of happened, to be honest, because Bellator have been an amazing promotion, and realistically everybody wants to see them carry on and pretty much do their own thing. But them being with the PFL, I'm not really too sure what's happening. Like I mentioned, they had that PFL versus Bellator event, and I think that was an entertaining event and showed some big things for the Bellator fighters, a lot of them having success. And just other than that, does the merge mean that they're eventually gonna put Bellator out of business? I'm not too sure. Sorry about my pronunciation, but Ferrer, I might be wrong in my pronunciation. Featherweight fighter, he's just left to be Bellator and just been dropped by the PFL, and like I say, left Bellator, and he had a lot to say about that Bellator was kind of going, and rest in peace Bellator. And so like I say, I don't really know what's happening, if they are actually going to be going, or if there's just going to be minimal fights from Bellator fighters or what. But this is pretty much an all Bellator clash, to be completely honest. But like I say, that's just another interesting thing, and it would be sad to see Bellator go. It would be a real shame, and for some of the great history moments that they have, like I say, it would be a real shame. Hughes as a fighter, though, like I mentioned, he's wanted to have that Conor McGregor backing, because his name has been linked around with him a bit. I mean, he's been the first Irish fighter since Conor McGregor to be the Cage Warriors featherweight champion, and that's no easy doing. It's definitely an impressive feat to be able to do that. And so you always, as an Irish MMA fighter in general, you always probably are going to get linked with that of Conor McGregor. I mean, you've seen Ian Gary get talked about a lot with having that kind of McGregor-esque type about him, or want to be like McGregor. Nobody is probably ever going to be able to be like McGregor. Hughes, he's not a bad talk on the mic, and he can be entertaining with what he's saying, and he's built somewhat of a narrative for this fight, but yeah, he's just not going to be at that level with McGregor. You can kind of expect that, to be completely honest. But, of course, Nurmagomedov has been an excellent champion so far in Bellator. This is his fourth defence now. He obviously had a fight as well, which was a no contest as a, title fight as well. So he's been fighting well, very well with Bellator, and I believe this is his first, official PFL event. He fought Shibili in 2024, so I don't believe it was kind of at the board. I think it was just before Bellator was merged officially with PFL. But he's been, like I mentioned, an excellent Bellator champion. He's had some great wins. I mean, you look at the Benson Henderson win, which was a big name for him to be able to win, and he also beat Ferrier as well. Like I mentioned, sorry about my pronunciation, but the Benson Henderson one was an excellent one, a first round submission. Obviously Benson Henderson was ex UFC champion. Obviously, that was 10 years before fighting Nurmagomedov, but like I say, for the most part, he is has been a very dominant, excellent champion. He refuses to go to the UFC, which is, completely fair enough because of the family name and the fact that he's got, Islam fighting at lightweight and being the world champion there, being the UFC champion there, and then also he's got Nurmagomedov, his brother, which is also fighting in the featherweight division. Obviously, he's just lost to Estebalashvili, but still, he doesn't really have any kind of want to go to the UFC and even get talked about competing with his family, which is that Dagestani respect name, and you don't want to do anything like that. Which I have a lot of respect for him not doing that, and in general, you kind of got to question. Obviously, Usman Nurmagomedov is coming off a loss, and it was a very close loss versus Merab, which was, to be honest, a surprise, and a lot of people, like I say, didn't expect it. It was a fight in which he was winning in the early parts of the rounds, and then ended up losing, just purely through Merab's just excellent conditioning. But do the Magomedovs feel pressure? That's my question. Like I mentioned, they are always going to have so much pressure on them because of the name in which Habib's left. Habib's, father has also left a great legacy as well. But just, yeah, in general, do they feel pressure? You've seen Islam Makhachev continuously beat up great fighters in the lightweight division in the UFC, and to be honest, also not overlooked any opponents as well, even when they've come in on short notice. Coming off a great victory versus Moicano, and do Nurmagomedov, like I say, feel that pressure? Do they? Is it something in which they've just kind of filtered out? I'm not too sure. That's just an interesting question, and I suppose the only way to realistically find that out would be to ask them. And I would like to hope, I'm sure they have been asked that, and I would probably have to go up and dig up an interview. But in general, it just doesn't seem like they do feel this pressure fighting continuously at the highest level of mixed martial arts. It's just never really seemingly got to them. And for somebody like Hughes, this is his biggest occasion so far in his career. This definitely could be possibly too much. We'll have to wait and see. He fought a big occasion against McKee and managed to look pretty excellent in my opinion. I thought he won unanimously in my opinion, but still, yeah, this is a big step up. And against the Nurmagomedov, the name alone, let alone how good of a fighter he actually is, you possibly would even have to consider him the best fighter in the PFL. That's not really a stretch in my opinion to say, and not really something in which I'm not gonna say, because I think he is probably the best fighter in the PFL. But yeah, in general, it's just going to be an interesting contest. I think there's both mental side of things as well, and Nurmagomedov has said in the build up to this that he wants to have Umar, he wants to have Islam, he wants to, of course, have Khabib in his corner as well. So he wants to have the main big names from the family, the brother, the cousins. He wants to have these great big names, and he said that that might make Hughes feel threatened. That might make Hughes unsure of himself. That might make Hughes doubt himself to an extent, because he won't have that same kind of level of backing, and he won't. He will look at his coach, his corner. It won't be as star-studded as that of Nurmagomedov's. But on the other hand, Hughes has said that that Usman isn't as switched on, or isn't caring as much as that of the other Nurmagomedovs. He said that from his sources that he's, like I say, doesn't take it as seriously. He's not as committed. He's not as you know driven as the rest of them. How true is that? I very much doubt it. I don't think that you can get to this level of any mixed martial arts and not be driven, not be really wanting to do and achieve everything that they can. And so yeah, in general, I just don't really know how much I believe that, but it was an interesting thing in my opinion for Hughes to say. Hughes as a fighter though, he's patient. I believe that both fighters are going to be patient, and I believe that this fight could be a bit of a chess match. If you look at Nurmagomedov's last fight, it was very much so a chess match, but he also fought it very well. Nurmagomedov, he fought it in a way in which he knew and showed his IQ. Shabili was a very complete power counterpuncher, and he knew that, and so Nurmagomedov was consistently on the back foot, fighting very well on the back foot, using the momentum in which he had, and really kind of choosing the attacks in which he wanted to go for, because he knew that Shabili was not as comfortable on the front foot, and he hadn't been allowed to be on the front foot that much in fights before. And like I say, that's not his bread and butter. That's not what he's known for, and Nurmagomedov was showing that very well. But like I say, going back to Hughes, he, like I say, is patient. He deals with being on the cage well. I think a negative about him is he's willing to go onto the cage quite a bit. He can be kind of accepting of going onto the back foot. I think if you come forwards with enough emphasis, he will willingly back up and just kind of stay on the corner, stay on the cage. Nurmagomedov is going to get you on the cage. He's probably going to suffocate you on the cage. He's probably, even if he can't get you down, really keep you there quite well. He's very good at doing that. And so Hughes can deal with that, and he's got very good takedown defense, but at the same time, he might put himself in them bad positions in the first place, which definitely isn't what you want to see. He's got solid timing, like I say. It's nice to see some of the shots in which he lands are clean, and like I say, have good power, come with solid timing as well. He's fast. He's definitely got that speed, but so does Usman as well. They are both fast fighters. He can fight on the front foot or the back foot, again, similarly, in my opinion, to that of Nurmagomedov. He's got good balance. He's got strong knees. He showcased that well versus McKee and had a lot of success with that inside knee, where he was able to even drop McKee at one point, and that was kind of reacting to a clinch and coming away from a clinch. I feel like that's what he does well. So if Nurmagomedov isn't able to get to the ground, if Hughes is able to utilize his good takedown defense on the cage, if he can find the moment to flip it and try and use his reactions at leaving the clinch, he might be able to land a shot which could hurt Nurmagomedov. He's uh, good at remaining upright, like again helping the fact that he's able to stay on the cage well. He's got relatively good scrambles, so if it does go to the ground, it is relatively good with scrambles. He's confident and in general, if he is confident, then he'll throw combinations that are nice and perhaps throw a bit more combinations than that of Nurmagomedov. He's got good counters at the same time as well. He steps up in opponents and normally improves with kind of every performance. So far we've seen that improvement. A lot of people, I feel like, I don't know if it's necessarily underestimating, but just not expecting him to do too well against McKee and really hurt McKee, and he did that very well, and he showed himself up very well there, and he definitely has that youthfulness about them. I mean, they are both young fighters. I think Hughes is actually the older one. I think Hughes is 28 and Nurmagomedov is 27 or 26, one of them. But yeah, they're both in MMA terms, and to be fair, in general, they're still young. They're definitely, in my opinion, probably haven't reached their primes, which could be scary to see what the prime of Usman could be. Negatives about Hughes, I think his head can be on the line a little bit at times. Don't think his head movement is excellent, but neither do I feel like Nurmagomedov's is. He's got quite a weak guard, and in general, he's not as strong, so Nurmagomedov definitely could capitalise upon that. He can be too eager on the ground. Like I say, he scrambles well, and is able to typically get back to his feet well, but he does give away submission opportunities. When he is trying to be the aggressor on the ground, he can give away submission opportunities, whether that be leg locks or just giving up the back in general. He does give away them submission opportunities because perhaps, like I say, he's too eager, he's trying to be too quick on the ground, and so I don't feel like as a whole he has that as completed ground game as that of Nurmagomedov. And to be fair, I mean, very few fighters do, but I just don't think that Hughes is quite on that same kind of level on the ground. I don't think he makes the most of being on top in good positions. McKee was quite often able to up kick in their fight and kind of nullify most of what Hughes was doing on the ground. He can stay in range too long, and like I say, he does accept the cage as well. To speak about Nurmagomedov as a fighter, he's very good at not loading up, but most of his shots are quite fluid and quite natural. Like I say, he's typically quite a slow, well, in his last performance definitely, he was typically quite a slow type fighter, and he waits for his moments. When he picks his moments, he can be quite explosive, but for the most part he's quite slow in his approach, but it's not loading up. I think it is just confident, composed nature about him. He's got creative takedown. He's definitely able to utilize various different ways to take you down. I mean, you see in the Nurmagomedovs, they love that kind of inside leg trip, and he utilizes that very well. He has varied kicks. I think he will go switch to the head, to the legs quite well. I think I'll touch upon his leg kicks in just a moment, but in general, like I say, he's able to vary them very nicely. He has that strength in takedowns as well, so yeah, I feel like every fighter that is excellent at getting takedowns at the top level have that pure strength to be able to do it and timing to be able to do it, and Nurmagomedov has that. He can catch you off guard, like I say, slowing down the tempo and then suddenly being quite explosive, going for a takedown can catch you off guard. You can find the back excellently as well, so if Hughes is making them mistakes, Nurmagomedov probably is going to pay. He switches stances as well, and to be fair, has good footwork. I feel like they both have relatively good footwork, and Nurmagomedov, like I say, was showcasing his back foot presence and his ability in that last fight of his. He capitalizes when you do make a mistake. He can fight on the front of the back foot, like I mentioned. He changes levels well, like I've said. He feints well as well. You know, Shabili wasn't kind of opening up too much to them feints, but in general, he is feinting quite often, and it normally is quite good, and he can have success from that. Like I mentioned, he's got a high IQ, he's got great submission attempts and just varieties, and the ability that he can have to go for a submission is just excellent. He can get you on the cage, like I say, and keep you on the cage for a prolonged period of time, and that's where he could just really suffocate Hughes on that cage. He's good at keeping a distance at the same time as well. I don't think he perhaps is able to fight as well on the inside as that of Hughes, but typically he is able to keep a good distance. And like I say, he picks his attacks and his moments very well. Negatives about him, I think he can stand quite tall at times, which, you know, it means he does get caught with certain shots by doing that. And in general, I think he does have quite lazy kicks at times. I think all of his head kicks look excellent, but when he's just kind of throwing them to the leg a bit, they're not thrown with crazy amounts of power. It's not like a, for example, Alex Pereira leg kick where it's really damaging even if he throws it really lightly. It's not quite that kind of level of power, so it does seem perhaps a bit lazy at times, and he can get caught off balance with shots if he is just throwing them. He can wait too long as well at times and just, then get caught with shots just waiting too long, kind of staying in range. He is not sometimes overly wary of what's coming back. Sometimes he is a bit oblivious to what's coming back and just kind of going for his own attacks and trying to find his shots more than anything. His head movement, like I mentioned, isn't really excellent, so he can get caught by just not moving his head and, like I say, waiting too long. He's not at not typically able to fight at a crazy high pace. I think he can, and I think his conditioning is very good. I think both of those conditioning is very good. Hughes has been 5 rounds in the past, but it has been a little while, and perhaps if Nurmagomedov sets a high pace, then Hughes might tire out a little bit, but he doesn't typically fight at a crazily high pace, Nurmagomedov, especially if it goes into later rounds. He is, it depends what game plan I suppose he comes with, what variation in which we see of him. He's overcommits, I think, a bit at times. I think some of his shots are a bit, they look like they're made to be at that mid-range, but he doesn't kind of shorten up his shots enough. He doesn't handle explosiveness, I think, that well, and Hughes has that speed about him to perhaps showcase a bit of explosiveness. He can be countered, he can be hesitant for combinations, and he seemed like he was a little bit hesitant to really let too much go against the against Shabili, but like I say, perhaps that was just a really smart way of doing it because he was so wary of the counters coming back from Shabili. He can attack sometimes from a bit too far out of range and jump a bit too far out of range as well. And in general, it's just a random thing in which I picked up on. I think he does slip quite a lot with his attacks, with his leg kicks, especially when they go to the head. He does seem to slip quite often. I don't know if it's slippy canvases. I don't know if it's the way that he sets them up. He's not got a wide enough stance to do that. I don't know, but I just feel like I say, I feel like I'm seeing him slip quite a lot, and if he does miss one of them, Hughes, like I mentioned, with the speed, might be able to get in a good position off of that. Nurmagomedov is the favourite for this fight, and I think that Nurmagomedov will win via TKO in round 3. I could see him having quite a lot of dominance through perhaps that bit more of a boring fight. I think he's going to land some head kicks. I think Hughes is going to go for a few knees in close, try and keep the fighting close, where I think Hughes might be able to have the most amount of success. But if Nurmagomedov is able to perhaps turn Hughes, if he is coming in quite aggressive, I think he's going to be able to have a lot of success by just keeping him on the cage. I think it's going to be difficult for him to get taken down to the ground, but I think at some point he will go down to the ground. Even if Hughes gets Nurmagomedov down to the ground, I think Hughes will make that mistake, even if he is in an attacking position. And I just don't think his wrestling is at that high enough level. His grappling, his just general, like I say, ground game is at that level enough to be able to deal with something like the Nurmagomedov. And I think, like I mentioned, the Nurmagomedov win via submission in round 3. Then we could go on to fight next. Like I mentioned, there really isn't a crazy amount of names at all in the PFL slash Bellator to really kind of give him a test. And so, perhaps he's not really going to get tested too much for the moment, and he's just going to keep cruising through and keep going through defense after defense and keep winning. Perhaps that might happen. Perhaps he might slip up on a unknown kind of banana skin type fight where he's really underestimating them. But he could still go on to fight McKee. Obviously, it was said it was a split decision versus Hughes. Like I said, I feel like it was a unanimous in my opinion, but that fight could still be there. He was an excellent Bellator fighter, and he might be willing to get back involved with it if a fight like Nurmagomedov is on the cards. Possibly Gadzi, but he is the PFL champion, and I also believe that he does train with the Nurmagomedovs. I think he also family with him as well, so that's a fighter that's going under the radar, Gadzi. I think he's an excellent fighter, but at the same time, I just don't see that matchup is going to happen. Like I said, there is so much about respect and family with that kind of camp, so I just don't see it happening. And even if it's just friends as well, I just don't know if I necessarily see that happening. So that's a bit of a shame, to be honest. But Colgan could be an option as well. He's I believe, 11-0 fighter. He's been with Bellator and has got himself to a good enough level to perhaps justify being given a title shot. Like I say, the options are quite limited. Perhaps the winner of the next PFL Grand Prix in the lightweight division could just get thrown straight into it. Like I say, I'm just not really too sure. I would love to see Nurmagomedov in the UFC at some point, but like I said, I just don't know for the moment if that's going to happen unless Makhachev goes up in weight and fights the winner of Muhammad versus Rakhmonov. He said he won't fight Muhammad, but possibly could fight Rakhmonov. So if he goes up, Nurmagomedov could slot into the lightweight division. Then they have Nurmagomedov at featherweight, Nurmagomedov at lightweight, and Makhachev at welterweight. That could be amazing to see, but we will have to just wait and see. But yeah, that is it for today's video. Hope you did enjoy. Like the video if you did indeed like the video, subscribe if you're new, and thanks for watching.